friends. Hello and welcome back to this episode of Tools for Transitioning Humanitarians podcast that I have been doing for quite some time now. And this time I want to introduce another topic that is, I think, so essential in how we deal with things, what we do things in life, what we don't do things in life. And that's why the tool that I'm calling it problems. And we all know somehow, I think at some level, that problems are also part of our lives. It's not like we can just live our lives with moods happy all the time or having all the things that we want, achieving all the things or all the. We know that that's not possible, or at least in order to do that, we need to solve certain problems to get there. Right. So I was thinking of how we could introduce or think about problems, not in terms of something that we can be afraid of or that we want to just avoid or we want to just like put it under the carpet, but rather look at it in terms of how they are the tools that can grow our muscles, that can help us evolve, that can help us achieve things that we want to or be the people we want to. And therefore, I was thinking, if we ever ask ourselves, what kind of problems do I want to have? Right? Like, what kind of problems do I want to have in my daily life? Do you think that many of us ask this question? I'm assuming not, and I think the reason why that is that A, because we're afraid of problems and we don't want to have them, and also B, because um, we just believe that we just need to like solve them as we go along. We just don't need to think about them. Thankfully that we don't have a problem of this type or that type, and therefore we just go on. And I think also because we don't really see those problems as something that we can use to, yeah, to be the versions, to be the person that we want to be in solving them, right? So, and I think also the reason why we don't really ask that question is because we're so much in the survival mode of like being afraid of problems and trying to solve the problems as we go along and just like, ah, we are thankfully this one is over, thankfully that one is over, and therefore we don't really sit down and think about what kind of problems do I actually want to have or I actually want to be solving in life, and what kind of problems I no longer want to tolerate anymore, because that's not really how I want to use my nerves, how am I going to want to use my energy. So that's why I invite you to think of problems from now on as a way, as a tool that can help us grow or that can help us or that can keep us being separate. So how do we want to choose or which one do we want to choose? So I have, in order to illustrate the level of problem solving abilities we have, I thought of using the language level learning that we have. And I love learning languages, as you know, so that's why I thought of borrowing their basic, intermediate, and advanced level like categorization. I took them from there to use it in this problem solving abilities that we have. So I have been thinking about how at the basic level, many of us are dealing with similar problems of blaming someone else or blaming ourselves, or feeling like I can only be happy, I can only achieve this if the other person does this, or if the other person behaves this. This is at the basic level the problem that many of us have and many of us deal with. Or another type of problem that we have at the basic level is we're lacking this, we're lacking that, I don't have this, I don't have that, and therefore we just stop there and we don't really go and solve the problems. We just believe that we can't do anything about it, and therefore this is I'm thinking of like the basic level problem solving abilities that we go through or that we have currently. And the reason why I'm thinking of them as basic is because like most of us at the reactive level, this is just how we do things, how we like interact with the world in the initial stages before reflecting about certain things, right? So that's why it seems like a very default thing that many of us do. And at the level of the basic, we just don't really need much commitment, don't need much like reflection in order to be solving any of them. We just believe that the easiest way to solve a problem is if the other person changes. The easiest problem to solve it if we just say that this is the problem and then just hope that someone else tells us what to do. And I feel like that's like the basic level of how we interact with the world and how we interact with the problem. And therefore, the downside of that basic level problem solution is also that because we don't really tend to solve it, we don't really tend to do much about it, and therefore we tend to suffer a lot from them. We tend to suffer a lot so that we keep then wishing that things were different. We keep wishing that we were different. We keep wishing that we had things that we don't have, or we believe that we don't have, right? So that's why we tend to stay in that suffering mode and a survival mode a lot of the time, unless we decide to do something about it. Now, as soon as we start looking and reflecting and seeing how we want to solve those problems in the long run, what are the things that we need to solve on our end? What are the things that we cannot really do anything about on the other people's end? We start realizing those things, then we go to that intermediate level, I'm calling it, where we're not really afraid of problems anymore. We're just taking them as this is part of life. Problems are part of life. We start understanding that other people behave the way they behave. They can't really behave the way that we expect them to behave. We start also realizing that beating ourselves up or blaming ourselves or always trying to um, keep telling that this is what we don't have, this is what we don't have, and we can't really do anything about it. We understand that life can't go on that way, and therefore we start thinking like, okay, what do I want to do? How do I want to solve these things? How do I want to solve it in a way that is no longer beating myself up or blaming and not longer blaming the other unless I want to do that in the court, for instance, right? So how do I want to solve these problems? Meaning that we start realizing that what if the happiness that I'm seeking for actually depends on me and not the other person, right? Or the same goes like, um, if I really want to be fulfilled at work, then I can't just keep complaining and saying that this is bad and this is bad and they're not giving me, excuse me, fulfillment, but rather do I want to change things or do I want to go somewhere else and do the work that fulfills me, right? So that is that I find that like the intermediate level when we start recognizing like how we are the agents of solving those problems instead of just being at the effect of them, instead of being like instead of suffering under their influence. Now then I see that we're getting to the advanced level problem solving is when we're actually not even afraid of problems, we're just actually on purpose creating problems to solve for. On purpose, we're getting curious as to, I'm wondering if this is the problem, then how would I solve it? If other people are having this problem, how would I help them solve it? Or how would I contribute to solving those things? And it's no longer about us or about our problems. It will be like, because we have sorted out a lot of the problems that we have, and we also sorted out that we can solve many other problems, and problems are not like something that just disappear, they continue coming and we just trust that we know how to solve them, then we have like the space and energy to solve problems out there in the world. And therefore we start then even like on purpose setting goals or setting things to work on, the projects to work on, so that we can keep solving those problems instead of just feeling like, oh my God, they're so difficult to solve, or they are something that cannot be solved, and all of those things. We just get so much curious into. I know that I have been able to solve these type of problems for myself. I have been able to do that in this setting. So now let me see if I can solve it in this setting as well. And then we get into that mode. And that's I'm calling it the advanced level. And of course, this is all arbitrary categorization as you can see it, right? But I just wanted to give you a visualization of how we could get ourselves from that basic level problem solving ability to the advanced level problem solving if we wanted to, so that we interact with problems not as something that is so being afraid of and so we don't know what to do with them. Rather, we are actually in the position to create the problems that we want to have and solve for, and what kind of and how we want to do that. Instead, just keep being in this struggle mode or avoidance mode or suppression mode, right? So that's why I really wanted to invite you to think of the following things in terms of getting yourself from the basic level to the advanced level if you wanted to. So one of the first things, of course, I would like to invite you to think about is what is actually a problem for you, right? When something becomes a problem for you and when it doesn't become a problem. Like my husband keeps saying that as something without a solution is not a problem, right? So every problem has a solution, and I love that approach. Is every single problem has a solution. So when something becomes a problem for you, and because I think the way that you can or the way that you can think of what is a problem for you can also give you an indication of where in this categorization you are and how do you want to then get yourself from the basic level of problem solving to the advanced level. Because this type of like getting yourself from the basic to the advanced level requires all of us to really recognize all the amazing abilities that our brains have in all the ways that we can solve problems and get so curious in. And that also requires us to trust our analytical skills, to trust our confidence, to trust our all the other abilities to not only solve the problems for ourselves, but also be there to solve problems with other people. And it requires us to recognize that. And that's why I love that idea of us being able to get ourselves from this basic level to the advanced level problem solving, where we're not only asking ourselves like how I can solve this problem, but we're actually saying what kind of problem do I want to be solving in life and how do I want to be doing that, right? And it will no longer be about oh my god, I'm so afraid, or this is happening to me again, I didn't want this. And no longer that type of conversation with ourselves, but rather this is the uh, uh, this is the problem that many people seem to be struggling, and how would one solve it and start getting like playful and curious about them and start solving for it. And I love being in that space because, as I said, because it requires us to trust ourselves and our abilities so much in our brain capacity and how our brains are such powerful machines that can solve like so many problems in the world. But also I love this state because it then gives me this distance and this like feeling like in charge of knowing how to solve a problem instead of feeling like under the influence of it or feeling powerless or feeling like I need to get away from this because otherwise I will suffer more, right? So that's why I would love to invite you to transition to being the person who no longer sits in this basic level of problem solving in terms of blaming others or blaming ourselves or keep criticizing ourselves or keep saying that I don't have this confidence or I don't have this security or I don't have this, I don't have that in order to achieve something that I want to. Instead of being in that state, I really want you, like, I want to help you transition to the state, to that advanced level state of problem solving, where we're asking the question of what kind of problem do I want to be solving and what kind of problem I don't want to be solving, because they just like cherish and love my brain's capacity to be solving, and therefore I just want to solve this type of problems, right? So in order to give you some like example from my own life is that I have, as I keep saying, right, that I have spent like most of my 20s to 30s keep surviving, keep feeling powerless, and keep feeling like all these problems are happening to me and for me, and how could I, and how could life be this so cruel, da, 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 and all of these things that I didn't have any time or any brain energy or space within me to be dedicated to something else that I really wanted to do in life. And therefore, I just kept like surviving from one thing to another, to another, to another. And all of this because of me seeing problems as something so monstrous, something so difficult to solve for, something that is not solvable, and therefore keep wanting to avoid them all the time. And therefore, I felt like I didn't really live all of those years. Instead, I was just trying to get like stay above the water, I think is the expression, right? But now as I'm realizing more and more of how precious my energy is, how precious my brain and its abilities, and exploring so much more about it, and also how I have been solving problems for myself and helping with my clients solve a lot of the problems in like approaching problems differently and approaching problems always from the point of view of how we're all capable of solving them instead of, oh my God, what are we going to do? Realizing all of this helped me now understand to be in this level where I always think about, okay, is this the problem I want to be solving or not solving? And therefore, I remember a lot of the things that were around my wedding that I didn't want to solve for because I just felt like that's not something that I want to just spend my time and energy for it. And therefore, I hired a company, a wedding planner company who did all of those things, right? So that's why I was like so curious about solving the problems of how my clients are struggling with this type of question and how do I want to help them solve this problem, or how I have been able to solve some of the problems of self-pity or some of the problems of confidence and some of the problems of decision making, and how I want to like record how I have been able to do that, and then how I can help demonstrate to my people so that they know how to then use it and go and like apply in their lives, right? So that's why I'm now so much more in this mode of choosing which type of problem I want to have and which type of problem I want to be solving for, and how do I want to do that instead of like trying to survive from one problem to another, or trying to just like deal with them and then getting over with, but rather I want to be the person who knows how to solve any of the problems or knows who to go to ask for help to solve them. And I want to be the person who knows also what kind of problem she wants to have and what kind of problem she feels or wants to solve for. Instead, just keep thinking of them as something that is draining, something that just sucks the joy out of my life, right? So that's why I invite you to come to coach with me to get ourselves to that level where we're really choosing which type of problems we're solving instead of surviving the effect of problems that we don't even want to have, but we feel like we keep having it and we just don't know what to do with them. So my dears, I really, really want like my really goal, um, like my goal of this episode and any episode really to show you and demonstrate you how powerful our brains are, how powerful our abilities are if we really recognize them, start using them to implement or to achieve what we want, and along the ways solve the problems that are necessary to solve to get to where we want to. So I really want you to come to coach with me to get to that level. Have an amazing week and speak to you soon.